extraordinaire, the gemologist.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the GMologist Presents. I have another special show for you today. I get to interview Wes Ascolese and Chris Koger of Spooky Bell Games. Now, you might have heard or looked at some of Chris's products or his product on twitch.io. He has something called D6 Danger System, and I'll put the link in the show notes, of course. But they wanted to come on and talk about a new project they have as they're going to do their first Kickstarter. So Chris, Wes, welcome to the show. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having us on.
Doing quite well.
Great. Yeah. So Spooky Bell Games, I guess maybe we should talk about them first before you get into what you all are all about. So tell us about Spooky Bell Games. I guess you're new on the scene and you're going to do some third-party stuff.
Yeah. So Wes and I came together with Spooky Bell Games, looking just to make some kind of odd, weird, or interesting things in the role-playing game space, which we've both been a part of for a long time. So we're starting off with an adventure for Morkborg, which is an existing system. We have a few more adventures lined up, as well as some systems and ideas of our own. What do you have to add there, Wes?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of just I started I was like, I'm gonna do a Morkborg adventure, and then it became sort of bigger than I thought I could handle by myself. And I know Chris has done tabletop RPG stuff for a long time and recently developed D6 Danger System. So I was like, hey, you want to do this with me? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, okay, well, we need a name. And he's like, I got these names. And then Spooky Bell just kind of spoke to me. So we went with that. And
what's the inspiration for the name Spooky Bell? Because you said you had a list of names, I guess. What's the inspiration?
Nothing super meaningful. I was throwing a bunch of names at the wall. I like the idea of Spooky Bell just because I can put out a game that's kind of like dark and grim, and the name will fit. But it's kind of a silly name also. So like if I put something more lighthearted out, then it makes sense both ways. So that was the big thing. And plus I had an image with this big bell. And
oh yeah, that's absolutely why I was like, hey, that one seems good, because it is both serious and like hilarious at the same time.
Yeah, I guess when I think of Spooky Bell, I think of like a cartoon Bell Witch or something like that. I don't know if you. So it could be lighthearted, but it could be serious. That's kind of cool. So I guess why Morkborg? Why do third-party adventure for Morkborg? I mean, there's a lot of games out there. I think we'll get into that because we want to know, our listeners want to know more about you guys and what makes you tick, and as a RPGer or creative. But why Morkborg?
I'll answer that first. I chose Morkborg because to me it is the system I've seen with the most open license. They allow use of pretty much all of their material, as long as it's not graphics. You can use their psalms or their miseries, as it were, their list of end of the world prophecy for your own narrative. You can use their setting, you can use sort of anything. And so as a first foray into something, it's really easy for me to be like, oh, hey, I don't have to build an entire world around this adventure, or I don't have to have it sort of sit as this ethereal island by itself in the space. It's grounded in some lore, and you can really build off of that. And while initially I did it as like hey, I want to get this easy adventure out, we kind of built something a little bit more substantial than I was expecting. So that's pretty cool. And also Morkborg is just cool, or Merkborg or Merkbori, as the Swedes might say. I just want to get that out there, that some people are real particular about that pronunciation.
I have not heard the G pronounced as a Y, but that's
so in Swedish. There is no real G. It's pronounced more like a J, and their J has like a Y-ish sound to it.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that. So say that again, Wes. all you listeners, this is a correct Swedish.
The most important part is actually the umlaut over the O.
Yeah, umlauts are always
is supposed to, so it's specifically Merk, so MURK for us English speakers, and Merk Bori, sort of getting into some of the Norse pronunciation there, but also you can kind of say it however you want. Johan, one of the creators, has always been whatever, pronounce it however you want.
So are we mispronouncing like Motley Crue? We mispronouncing.
I'm sure there are plenty of mispronunciations. Although Motley Crue is created by a bunch of Americans, so I mean,
yeah,
who knows?
Motley
Crue. Correct.
Yeah. So, well, Morkborg is actually that kind of works, even though Motley Crue technically to me is like a hair band, not really metal, but Morkborg is always associated with metal. Does that have any? Is there any like kind of connection with that with you guys? Or
yeah, like with Morkborg, it's kind of self-described as very over the top doom metal, apocalypse, end of the world, grim kind of setting. But almost in the same way as like, an old metal band satanic cover was made to scare your mom, so a kid thinks it's cool. It's very grimdark, but it doesn't take itself too seriously, which then is a pretty fun world to play around with. And the Morkborg's put out by this company called Free League, which Wes mentioned, like they're super cool about their licenses. They've made a ton of rad games besides Morkborg, like Tales from the Loop and Mutant Year Zero and a bunch of other stuff. So
yeah, I'm a big fan of the new Twilight 2K game. I've been running that game for like a year, and I haven't taken a look at the license, but now it makes me want to. If you're saying that their open license is pretty generous, or their to use it proprietary stuff is pretty generous, which is cool. It's great for us that haven't made that step over into publishing and think that want to. I think many a GM wants to take the things that they've thrown at the players and publish it somehow. So so how did you guys start off in the hobby that we love so much?
I'll hop in first.
Yeah, I was like, I'll let the oldest go first.
Yeah.
Oh, age before beauty.
Yeah. No, yeah, I started in middle school and high school in like the early 90s to mid 90s. We started on Dungeons and Dragons second edition, AD&D 2E. And that's kind of all I knew for a little while. Then we branched out into the West End Star Wars D6 system.
Oh, nice. That'll please some of my listeners who are big. They say that's the only true Star Wars RPG is the West End.
I love it. I've even run it a couple times in the last couple of years. It was
so goofy.
Yeah, Wes played in one of those games actually.
I got to be a Trandoshan and I crawled like an alligator.
Oh, Trandoshans, yes.
Yeah. So good stuff. But yeah, a little bit of Cyberpunk 2020. And I play those games forever. I took a couple breaks here and there. I played live music for years also.
Oh, nice.
And then when I moved into San Antonio, kind of came back to the gaming scene. First is like miniatures games and Warhammer stuff and that. And then back into the role-playing game systems and role-playing games. So that's kind of where I started, and then I got super deep into weird indie games and one-pagers a few years ago and have kind of never looked back since then.
Yeah, that's cool. So you guys have been played together for a long time. Is that what I just understood? Wes, you played in his D6 Star Wars game?
So that's more recent.
Okay. So you've revised it. Oh, well, a friend of mine would also, it's the same friend who loves the West End D6 would also appreciate that you like the Cyberpunk interlock system. So that's great. Yeah, those are some of my favorite. I don't know. That was always a big thing, right? Shadowrun versus Cyberpunk. There are the Shadowrunners and the Cyberpunkers, I guess. I don't know. Is that true? I don't know if that was true back in the day, but But
Yeah,
Who
we
knows?
used to stand on street corners and yell at each other from.
yeah.
you got
Yeah,
elves in my cyberpunk. I got cyberpunk
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
in my elves.
the shadow runners would throw their piles of d6 at you.
Yeah, they're 500 d6.
All right. Well, Wes, how did you get into it?
So, I much like Chris here, I started off in middle school. I'm just about 10 years removed from so I started off with 3rd edition D&D as most people start off with, which a lot of people my age tout as the best edition of D&D, which of course everyone thinks their edition is the best edition. I'm not quite of that school, but the funny thing is I probably played a grand total of 2 D&D games and maybe a combined total of about 10 sessions. So like nothing, no real experience other than just poring over the books, page after page, because of course I come from the generation of really advanced video games and tabletop RPGs were sort of waning at that time. And of course the massive amount of splat books that 3rd edition and 3.5 had were just really awesome to look at. But of course, as a 13 or 14-year-old having to remember about 100 rules is a little hard. I also was into original World of Darkness, which was a lot for a 12 to 13-year-old, but kind of shapes me as a person these days.
Vampires or werewolves?
Vampire first, and then I was super into Gangrel Clan, and so I was like, oh well, I can just play a werewolf, right? But yeah, we kind of, and then basically I didn't play much of anything until college. I mean, I had the books, and I was into 40K when I was in high school. Never was well off enough to purchase anything really, other than a handful of models. And then college came around, and I actually got in on the playtest for 5e. I was like, wow, this is pretty fun. And somehow it just like exploded from there. And then we'll fast forward even further to about, Chris, how long have we known each other? 5 or 6 years, something like that.
Yeah, about that.
And this cool old musician guy was like, hey, you want to play some weird, I don't even remember how we met, Chris. I mean, I'm sure it was at Night Watch, but we just, what did we play first? Probably the Sprawl, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse cyberpunk heist game, which is pretty awesome. And then he got me into like Trash Can, which is this one page. It's like if you were playing Redwall, but instead of mice and stuff, you play like a goat and a raccoon or a pigeon, that sort of thing. So
it's like an urban version of Redwall is like a medieval feudal, right? So this is like what if you were playing Redwall in London or something.
Correct.
Like goats and possums and raccoons.
And all of your quests are related to like picking up trash, and it's your treasure, and you smoke cigarettes and are a bad influence to everything around you.
Night Soil, the role-playing game, anyway.
But yeah,
that's
so
pretty
like,
interesting. Actually, it sounds pretty cool, honestly. Well, there's been there's actually been a big push. Like you have Humblewood and Historia and things like that. There's always been like a sub niche of playing like anthropomorphic heroes, right? So I think
we just
anything
played
like that.
Mouse Ritter.
Oh yeah, Mouse Guard is out there too. Mouse Ritter, right?
Mouse Ritter was about a month ago, and that was a lot of fun. And actually, it's pretty similar to Morkborg in terms of
interesting
rule sets.
Well, that's cool. So you guys mentioned that you started in middle school, and I predate you guys maybe by about a decade. And we had did you guys have D&D clubs then in middle school or early high school? Did the Satanic Panic squash all those by that time? I don't know.
We did not where I came from.
Yeah, I didn't either.
That's interesting. No, I mean, because people are the big thing, right? Stranger Things right now takes place in the supposed to late 80s, and So I definitely can relate to that. But I guess by that time, it kind of went underground. And like you alluded to, Wes, by the time the early aughts come around, then this big push for fantastic video games and
And
a
especially
waning.
MMOs.
A waning. Yeah, World of Warcraft, right? That was a big one. A waning of the tabletop RPG, despite the OGL and 3.5 Pathfinder. Yeah, I still run and play those games. I still like those games. I mean, I ran a game the other day, Dark Sunsetting for second edition with Pathfinder rules.
Hell
So
yeah.
that system really works, and it's it's stayed the test of time, and I think because of that, right? I think that kind of led to this big, right? The OGL from 3.5 is kind of the model, I think, of how all of a sudden we have how 5e has become so popular, right? It's an open license. There's 5e products for everything, and then now these other companies are getting into that OGL. Hey, let's have other people. Let's get this creative mass of people that are playing our games to add to our product, which I think is great.
Yeah, I was to say, I mean, absolutely. But you see tons and tons of companies doing open gaming licenses, like OGL, that putting out SRDs, system resource documents that anybody can use. And I think especially with a lot of smaller creators or a lot of maybe larger companies like Free League that still have an eye on small creators, is that they realize that kind of like, the tide raises all ships. The more people that are into their stuff, the more people that are creating things for their games, the more people funnel back into what they're making and enjoying. Plus, I think the mentality also kind of with people like younger than me and Wes's age and even younger, there's more of a like leveling the ground kind of idea around equality, even in gaming, and making things more open. That carried across a lot of that,
Well, that's sort of the cool thing about an open gaming license is there's a stigma of homebrew for 3.5. I mean, or third edition, or even Pathfinder, especially because they just have so much content that it's like, why would you have a homebrew of a certain thing? And that's not to say homebrew isn't used or wasn't used, but when you have an open gaming license and you can get something published so easily nowadays, I mean, we'll talk about this later, but that's kind of how Chris and I stumbled into this, was just like, oh, we can just do that now. We can just spend about an hour researching online and I mean, more than that, but to get the basic idea of what this is going to cost and what this is going to entail, we kind of just like, okay, yeah, we can do that. That's not ridiculous. Whereas like if you homebrew something, it sits on the internet for decades until some YouTuber comes along and mocks your ridiculous build. But yeah, and also to that same token of open gaming license, one cool thing that the Morkborg creators do is they put together what's called Morkborg cults, which is basically they curate a bunch of third-party Morkborg stuff that fits their world the best and that fits their balance the best, and they'll publish that in its own little zine. And I think that's pretty influential and pretty encouraging to new creators that a company that we perceive to be as professional and big is willing to like be like, hey, your stuff's cool enough that we're going to make it official now.
Oh, nice. That's really good. Yeah. Well, since you kind of segued into it, Wes, how did Spooky Bell come about then? You said it was easy. You just studied
yeah.
You watched a YouTube video.
Absolutely. I didn't even watch a YouTube video, man. It was easy though. I'm not going to lie. Like, we're definitely stressed and we definitely worked very hard on Beyond Deep, which is our adventure that's coming up. But like initially I was like, I'm just gonna, write up 5 locations. I literally like Googled how to write an adventure and asked some friends, and I kind of got it in my head. Okay, well, I have my have my MacGuffin. I have my my One Ring, my relic that they're gonna go try to find. I have a town that they're gonna go to. I have 5 locations that I'm gonna go to, and I'm gonna put an NPC at each one of those locations. And that was kind of like I was like, oh, I could do this real easy. And then I was like looking at printing costs, which is surprisingly cheap on certain. I can't speak to the quality of our printer yet because we haven't gotten approved for anything, but the cost was just so within reach that I was like, oh, I can kickstart that amount of money, especially because I have a graphic design background, so like I can do my page layouts, no problem. Honestly, the biggest cost was art, and that's just because I like to pay artists what they're worth.
That's awesome. That's great to hear.
Yeah. I mean, and I didn't want to like be like, oh, you'll get a percentage of whatever I make, but yeah, man, it was super easy to figure out. And then I was like, hey, Chris, this is becoming a little bit more than I want to handle by myself. Because I did come to like a couple hurdles of how do I even get started of writing our story, because writing a story is, I think, the hardest part of doing all of this. You can plug mechanics into, I go to the store, so I roll a d6 to do this, or I roll a d20 to do that. But if you want something interesting and compelling, you kind of gotta mess with stuff. So I was like, Chris is old. Chris has been doing role-playing games for a long time. If you can't tell, I like to bully anyone older than me. Because, yeah. Well, so that comes from having a boomer parents and them talking about how easy I have it and stuff like that all my life. So I just like to remind people that they're old. So
So then, Chris, how did you jump in then to form this partnership?
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, Wes and we've known each other for a while. We talk games all the time and ideas all the time. And he was working on a project and hit me up and said, we were talking about the project, and then he asked me, hey, do you want to be a part of this? And I said, I'd love to. And he was working on an idea we had kind of discussed before. And it was an idea that I wanted to be a part of, and I was excited to work with him as a friend. And it's worked out really well because we were kind of, we're aligned in a lot of ways, and like things that we think about the world and kind of our worldviews, as well as our taste in games and stuff. So it was easy to get a creative rapport going back and forth when we really dug into the project. And then, like Wes said, he's handling a lot of graphic design. I put a lot of work into writing, and then he'd put some work into writing, and then I'd be editing. And so kind of our skill sets balance each other out in a lot of ways. And usually if I'm pretty low energy, he can swing in, for a couple of days. And then when he's got shit going on, I can, swing in instead. So
yeah, I find that worked out incredibly well. Being a couple of depressed nerds in 2022 it's rough out here. I'm sure plenty of your audience will relate to that.
Oh, definitely.
That's, I think, honestly, the biggest hurdle is getting over your own feelings of inadequacy and just write the dang thing.
Imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah. Imposter syndrome times 1,000. I as a not to bring up my graphic design thing again, but as someone who's done graphic design, it's hard to convince yourself that like you're good at it because it's so just all over the place, and you've put in the hours to learn this skill set, but then some 12-year-old in Finland can do it just as well as you can, and you're like, am I really doing anything here? Am I capable? And similarly to RPGs, to tabletop role-playing games, that there's an infinite amount of there are more adventures already written than I could play in my lifetime. Who am I to come out here and be like, yeah, this adventure is something you should play? But I'm actually to the point now where I think we did come up with something that I think people should play. And we'll talk about why that is. We'll get into the philosophical implications
All right.
of writing that adventure, which is, I think it's kind of funny that we did this in Morkborg, but it also fits super well. Being a doom metal RPG really lends itself to tackling some more important issues, because the system is so simple and that the like flavor is just so ridiculous that you can kind of wrap anything you want in it and it'll be cool in the end. So
Nice.
Pretty interesting.
Yeah, so it's great. So let's talk about this product then. Let's talk about your Kickstarter. You did mention Night Watch Games. That's a gaming store here in San Antonio, Texas. We'll put the link in the show notes for them. Great place, great people. Really enjoy running and playing games there. It's neat because it's attached to a cosplay, like a costume store, right? So you can go and say, "Hey, this is what I'm gonna buy when I go to Ren Fair." So it's pretty neat place. Do tabletop gaming. You guys both mentioned the tabletop gaming background. Warhammer 40K, a big thing for me as well. So so neat. It's kind of cool that a lot of us have very similar origin stories. But they kind of diverge. I've been stuck to like the D&D stuff a lot for the most part, with a smattering of science sci-fi type games, although including 40K stuff, Dark Heresy, etc. But and I've only now started delving into the indie games powered by the apocalypse, etc. And really enjoying it. I mean, it's good to me to diversify both in as you play and as you run. So anyway, let's talk about Beyond Deep. Tell me about the project. Let's sell it to the listeners. We'll definitely link the Kickstarter information as we can in the show notes. So go for it.
Yeah, I'll start that off. So basically, it started for me as I wanted to make an adventure about workers' rights and about sort of my experience as someone who's worked in retail, just as a lot of people have, and the whole union debacle that's happening currently. And then Chris mentioned to me offhandedly, like, "Hey, this is a really cool idea that a necromancer is," which is an idea that everyone in fantasy is familiar with, a mage who brings things back from the dead to become his undead minions, is using these undead workers to bust unions, to pay his workers less, to have his perfect little workers do whatever he needs. I don't know if you could tell, but I'm pretty left leaning in my ideals, and a lot of people don't like to get politics in RPGs, and I'm like, I'm so tired of it that I just want to feel something. I think RPGs, to steal a line from Chris's spiel on his bio, that they can be really cathartic. They can help you work through some stuff or help you think about things in a certain light. But Beyond Deep is also set in basically the medieval equivalent of a company town, which is a town that is set up by a mining company. They're very popular in the turn of the century in the United States, and even earlier in the early 1800s, more out west. But it just seemed like a sort of perfect backdrop to what we wanted to do with the story. I'll let Chris expand upon his ideas and how he approached the story writing for this.
Yeah, we had talked about that idea, and it seemed like such a tasty idea. And one of the things I love about like fantasy and science fiction, right, is that you can take real world ideas and you can kind of like put them in a different setting or pump them up to the maximum to really kind of have to interface with the idea. So like a necromancer that like lets his workers die, then raises them, and then uses these animated corpses to basically undercut his living workers. It was kind of like the farthest, you know what I mean, I could think of and take an idea like that. And then we've talked, Wes and I, about different inspirations and history, the Appalachian area and region. Even like Old Gods of Appalachia, the podcast, kind of mixes horror, but you look at history, right? You look at like the Battle of Blair Mountain in 1921, where you have thousands of coal miners facing off against scabs and hired security and state police and everything, trying basically to just get a decent life. And so like those are things we don't talk about as much. It's kind of in the news again these days, but like I think a lot of people don't know the history of like how horrific things were for such a long time, and how like everything that you take for granted in your life is built on the back of someone putting in their work and putting their lives on the line. And so we kind of took all those ideas and boiled them down and threw them into Morkborg, which is kind of like the worst world that you ever could live in.
Right.
That's like, literally the apocalypse is happening around you. There's a mechanic in the game where you roll to see if that's the day the world ends, and it's kind of like, well, in this worst place ever, of course, these horrific things are happening. How do you interface with it? How do you now, when everything else is like so terrible and there's more terrible things going on, like what does that look like in that world? And then you can put your characters in the middle of that situation and kind of let them deal with it. And it adds an interesting push and pull to just like I kill zombie and big scary monster jumps out. You get like I kill zombie, big scary monster comes out. Also, there's like all these factions and powers in play, and now I've got to figure out how to I want to align myself with them.
That's cool. It's interesting that you picked Morkborg, because when you're talking about this game, it seems like you could place this kind of scenario and use what you guys are coming up with and place it in different genres. Would you think that's accurate? Right.
Absolutely.
You could do like I'm running a Hostel game, which is Cepheus Engine, Traveler, Classic Traveler, well, Mongoose Traveler 1, SRD or OGL, and it's like, Hostel is kind of like, think about Outland or Alien, the company, they make you do things that are kind of
more
not ethical.
Gray, yeah.
Right. So I could totally see how you could tweak it from magic to something sci-fi-ish and have almost the same type of.
Well, and those are kind of like the adventures I want to write. I'm not married to Morkborg. I do like this adventure in Morkborg simply for the fact that, you have a class called Gutterborn Scum. And sometimes on a weekday, I feel like Gutterborn Scum, man, like clocking in. I'm like, so that's something interesting about Morkborg is it kind of emulates this crushing weight of like the end of the world, which is kind of how I think a lot of people feel sometimes. Is just like, well, how do I deal with all of this? Well, I just go into work and I just clock in and I do my job and I go home and I play some video games. I go to sleep and I get up and I do it all over again. The nice thing about a role-playing game is you can take a risk and see what it's like to change that portion of your life or to change that portion of someone else's life. Not to like get super philosophical on a game that has a skinless skeleton for a monster in its back pages and has goofy ridiculous. The fanged deserter's main thing is that he's got sharp teeth and he bites people, but maybe that guy's the hero that day. Maybe that guy thinks that the necromancer is worse than the guy who's just trying to feed his family.
Well, like you said, it's cathartic, right? And it could be done in like a horrific way, or done with a bit of humor and I guess what's the term? It'll come to me, but there's definitely like it sounds really fun. It sounds irreverent, right? And sometimes irreverence and humor with some serious overtones or undertones in this case can really, it sounds really cool, honestly, guys. It sounds really cool to
appreciate that,
what you guys are coming up with. But tell me about the specifics. When is it coming out? When's the Kickstarter starting? When's it coming out?
So soon after this recording.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, the first of August. So
1 August. Okay.
yeah.
So
this will be out by the time.
yeah, definitely.
Yep. No worries.
And this is for they're doing like a zine thing, right? Again,
correct. Zine Quest.
Zine
this
Quest
year,
is part of Zine Quest.
Yep, it is going to be in August, and so we're going to be doing something for March next year too.
Yeah,
which
cool.
would be
That's
cool.
good. That's good. It's good to have plans. Definitely, I'm glad it's not like a one and done. You know, you're not going to be a one hit wonder, right? You seem like you guys have a lot of ideas to put them together. So we'll see some more from Spooky Bell. You know, in continuing succession. Like Chris, you already have like your danger system as well, right? Is that going to see some more material?
Yeah, so
Spooky
there's
Bell?
a couple of adventures out for it right now. I'll probably put out at least one more.
Okay.
And then bind it all together as kind of
neat.
It's a super lean system. It's comes from a minimalist game idea. Everything's built around kind of one role, and that one role defines 2 or 3 things that are going on in the situation.
Yeah.
And that one's more multi-genre, kind of any setting. So
that's cool. So how big is the zine going to be? You think?
Pretty big.
Okay.
We were talking about that just like a couple days ago, and originally we had it in our mind that it was 48 pages, and which is like kind of standard. Turns out no, it's going to be more like 96 pages.
Oh, nice.
It's going to be pretty thick.
It's like a full on adventure with supplementary material, right?
It's definitely not a one shot like I had originally planned. It's definitely like a 3 or 4 session deal. You could stretch it out even further depending on how much role play that you want to get down with. We, like I said, when it started getting away from me, I was like, Chris, come help me. And then it kind of blew up even more. We kept adding stuff, which is good. I think we have some pretty neat ideas. Chris came up with some truly horrific monsters. There's one I'd like to spoil a little bit called the Flesh Esca. Am I pronouncing that correct, Chris?
that is correct. Sir.
So
Flesh Esca.
Yeah. So it's basically a terrestrial angler type predator that it sort of props up a corpse and uses it like a ventriloquist dummy to lure other people into the mines. And it's kind of like this tentacly, almost like a centipede, but not quite, horrifying monster that's mixed with some sort of angler fish. And it's just like, the first time I read it, I was like, I don't like that. Cause I mean, it reminds me of like, there's this episode of Doctor Who where they go into a library and there's the Vashtu Narada, the basically things that live in the shadows that are microscopic and you can't see them. And that sort of terror always, freaks me out. But
the Flesh Esca is fun too because it can learn kind of 3 or 4 phases. It doesn't know what they mean, but it can just kind of mimic them back, so it's got a little light on it, like an anglerfish kind of looks like a torch. You wander down a cave, you see the body of somebody kind of in this dim torchlight, and it can say a couple phrases, and it's basically just trying to get you close enough so it can eat you also, and then you're the next prop, you know what I mean, along the way.
Wow. So is it like an adventure, and then you have like because when you mentioned how you're coming up with this, you have like location that has like a gazetteer of your company town. Do you have like a bestiary? Is it sectioned off that way? Or
so it is kind of leaning in that direction. And depending on how well we do in the Kickstarter, we may produce some more some more creatures, because basically we have 2 sets of creatures right now. We have the undead and the necromancer and all of his stuff, and then we have these this duo of natural creatures. And like, to me, something that makes a monster scary is either that it has these horrible motives or it has no motives other than it wants to eat. And so those are sort of the 2 things that drive horror for me. If it's in between, like, dragons to me aren't scary. Dragons are these big lazy lizards that sit in caverns and hoard whatever they want. Now, I'm sure someone can make a dragon scary. That's not to say, smog's not terrifying. But if you want to touch on horror aspects, you kind of got to go one edge or the other. And then, yeah, we have, how many locations we up to now, Chris? 6?
7
Jeez.
locations in town. There's a whole town. I think Wes said, what one of the things that was kind of like a discovery was when we were working on having a mine. He's like, we had a mine, I realized like I needed a town around the mine. So you can wander around town and there's tons of characters with backstory and motivation and things in the different places. Multiple NPCs. Like I said, 7 locations. There's stuff going on in all of them. There's a big overarching story, about what's going on in the mines and kind of end of the world stuff to the workers and the mining company, and all their motivations and the church, and then you can go down to the mine and there's, 4 or 5 levels in the mine that in every level's got stuff going on. So there's a depth of tables and encounters and people and monsters and places and maps and stuff to interact with, which is why it's now like 96 pages. So.
Yeah. And then, but funny enough is honestly, if you run it a certain way, the players could just rush into the mines and do what they're going to do. And you could end it in, 4 hours. I don't think it'll ever be played that way. There's just too much like character bait out there to entice people. But I mean, the location of the mine's not secret because it's the main money source of the town. All the other buildings are sort of inconsequential if you're equipped correctly. And there is a bit of I won't spoil it, but there's a bit of a something on the last 2 layers of the mine that may require you to go search in the town, but realistically you could muscle your way through it and just go get the thing that you need to get. That's something I didn't mention. So I mentioned that that Morkborg has these psalms or these miseries that exhibit that basically the 2-headed basilisks or the god figures in Morkborg expound upon and are sort of doomsaying. And that's kind of how I had the idea for Beyond Deep, and then I was like, how do I tie this into Morkborg? So I kind of just read through the miseries, and actually Josh Harper, who you spoke with from Storywood, kind of was like, hey, this one seems like it fits what you want to do. And I was like, absolutely. And it's about a great stone falling from the sky and obliterating anything in its path. And so basically the gist of it is that it killed most everyone, and then a mining company came in and was like, hey, this can make us money.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then it evolved from there, man. I mean, we could have just had a mine and some monsters and a boring necromancer at the end, but it has evolved substantially. And we did this all in 6 weeks, 8 weeks.
Yeah, pretty much.
So would you say it's ready to go then? It just needs the publishing cost?
It's real close. We're going to give it a couple more small editing passes.
Nice. That's really good.
Yeah.
So you feel like a quick,
it needs
good
art,
for people.
but,
Art, but then like a quick turnaround time then, right?
Oh yeah. We plan to get it out by January.
Oh, wow. Nice.
But it's going to, I don't want to promise that it's going to be sooner, but I feel like it's going to be sooner than that. It really depends on art at that point and my ability to lay out the astronomical amount of pages.
Well, yeah, printing too, right? I mean, printing.
Well, so that's the crazy thing is our printer promises a pretty quick turnaround, like something like
nice
3 weeks, which is nuts. and even if they do it in twice that time, I think we're still in good shape. I mean, unless we radically overfund into a place of we got to shift gears, it should be coming out here in January.
Nice. So you guys been totally focused on this, or is there any other games that you might be playing or running right now?
I've been kind of just focused on this, and then Chris, you could talk about what you've been doing in your life because you've been focused on this and then like real life. So
yeah, just from a gaming perspective, a lot of my focus is on Beyond Deep and getting it done. And in a project of this scope, there's promotion and other things and running budgets and project management. And I have a business background, professionally for a while. So I've kind of hopped into that side.
Which has been invaluable, but I also have to like remind him that he doesn't run a Starbucks anymore.
Right.
A group of Starbuckses.
Yeah. But also, I mean, I still run games. The Mouse Ritter we mentioned earlier, I ran that recently. I run a consistent 5e D&D game, which we realized we're at like 2.5 years running.
That's
now.
Awesome.
Yeah, which has been super cool.
Your own stuff, or
yeah, always. I beg and borrow and steal ideas here and there, like every person, but like I don't know that I've ever run a module in my life, like a pre-written module,
which is funny because I'm the exact opposite.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just I've never like, and it's one of those things, like, so I mentioned playing music, right? Like when I was like really young and like just awful at guitar, and I got in this little like ska punk band, we were playing covers and we started writing music, and it was like half because we wanted to write our own music and become our own thing, and half because like we were too terrible to play a lot of other people's music. And so like I think like that was kind of how I got into just always writing my own stuff, also because I had no money, so like I couldn't afford to buy splat books and modules and stuff, you know what I mean? Like I just had to come up with my own stuff all the time, and that's like how the guy who taught me D&D did it too. So
that's weird, because I have like a completely like same thing. I don't have a lot of money, so I'm like, okay, how can I take this splat book and expand it into like a year-long session? Because before we really knuckled down this past month, I was actually running a D&D game for Chris and a couple of my other friends, but I was like, I need a month hiatus to get this sort of knitted up before I go back. But I mean, it's like run off of Cobalt Press's stuff, because they have a really rich lore driven campaign setting that not everyone knows. So it's like running Lord of the Rings, but no one knows what you're talking about, so you seem cool and and that you have all this knowledge. But yeah, I never heard that. That's a very interesting thing, Chris. We'll have to talk about that more, because I think that's we have similar approaches to our role-playing backgrounds, but very different practices.
Yeah. That's very curious. That's cool though.
I appreciate that. See that you've taught us something about ourselves today, Carl.
Yeah. But from here about bringing people together, even though you guys are already together and seems like a great partnership, a lot of synergy, not a lot of talking over too, I noticed. That's great. So but hey, that's what I'm here for. So yeah, I think we definitely gotta give me some links so I can put all this stuff down. Do you have like a preview page like Kickstarter usually does? I can link that as well. Yeah, so we'll get that information. I think we've had a great conversation, and we're running up here to an hour, honestly, of really good conversation. I think, can you believe it? It's been almost an hour. So don't want to kill our listeners. So
yeah, for sure.
So maybe let me get both Chris and Wes, let us know how we can contact you guys, and if you want to say anything else about the project Beyond Deep, or anything about gaming, or something about yourself that maybe is not gaming related, that maybe the listeners and fans would think is kind of cool.
Sure. I'm gonna go first because I think Chris has all the social media stuff kind of buttoned up and has been doing most of the advertising. But one thing that I'd like to tell everyone who's thinking about doing an adventure or whatever, just do it. Just write it. Even if it doesn't have any rules, a lot of people are having great success with system agnostic type of adventures these days. And originally I was gonna I'm an amateur bookbinder as a hobby. That's something cool about me. So originally I was gonna write this up. I was going to do like maybe 16 pages, 32 total front and back, and print it up, staple it, finish it with my tools, and call it good and sell it for like $5 or whatever materials cost. I've been lucky that I found someone that really kind of believed in the project and was able to push me just the right amount to where I'm not going to give up, but create sort of a real world that we got going on here. I'm excited for future projects with Chris. You can reach us at pretty much anything Spooky Bell Games, but I think Chris has all the particulars on that.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say something. I thank you for saying that, Wes, because I have, I did like in spring, early summer, I did this like convention circuit. I went, small convention circuit. I went to Chupacabra Con and North Texas RPG Con, some local cons here in Texas. And then we're going to have a Crush the Con here in October at Dragon's Lair. I know Storywood's going to participate. I hope you guys are ready to join in and participate as well. It'd be great to have you. Dragon's Lair is going to host it. But I ran some games that I, created myself in my little notebook. But I thank you, Wes, for reminding me that I need to just sit down and write these up, because they are well received. Especially like I have like a really cool Weird Frontiers game that even the best compliment to me is like, hey, when are you guys going to publish it? Because I was wearing my Weird Frontiers shirt, so I guess they thought I was good. David Beatty and co. The guys who, Sticky, Stiff Whiskers Press, who makes it. So I guess I got to do it. So thanks, Wes, for reminding me. Maybe here in August as things settle down, and we don't want to go outside because it's so damn hot in South Texas. So maybe it's a good time to do it. All right, sorry, Chris, go ahead. Give us all the info.
Yeah, and honestly, just make it, man. I mean, like that's like, I was telling somebody else, like I appreciate Wes. We talk about games and music and politics and life and different stuff, but like he kind of like helped reignite that like little punk rock brat that's kind of inside of me still, to just like make something and put it out, regardless of whether it does well or doesn't do well or sells 1 million copies or sells 10, is just to put your heart into something and do your best job at it and put it out into the world, and then do it again, and do it again after that, So that's kind of the mentality that we have, right now. But yeah, I mean, Wes said it, Spooky Bell Games, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Kickstarter, spookybellgames@gmail.com is the email. If you hop on Facebook like an old person, there's usually links to the Kickstarter and to our email newsletter and all that kind of stuff as well. So, and then obviously please go check out the Kickstarter. We're launching on August 1st. We're super excited about it. You've mentioned Storywood, and we appreciate Josh and all those guys. They've been an inspiration as other people who are local, who I've played games with and known from the past, who have just decided to go and do it,
that previously had no experience other than, hey, we like these games. And I guess that's how like everyone starts, right?
Yeah, Storywood is great.
Yep.
Yeah, Storywood is great. So shout out to them. I know they're doing the get together, right? They do get together here. If you're in San Antonio, they do a get together last Saturday of the month, right? So hopefully, a bunch of creative people can get together, hang out, talk about games, all the fun stuff. All right. Well, thanks so much, guys, for spending an hour of your time talking about your game. Sounds really amazing and awesome. Very inspirational on your creative process and how you guys got together. I'm very excited about the project. I know August is going to be going to start, putting that card down for all these zines. Quest is an amazing thing that Kickstarter does for people in our hobby. I already have at least 2, maybe more, that I'm going to be supporting. So thank you so much, guys, and hopefully we'll get to talk again as the process goes. I'd love to have you guys on again, and hopefully we'll hang out and play some games together.
Heck yeah.
Appreciate you.